What began as a storm became a home, proof that even in winter, love can bloom and never fade. The snow fell in thick, muffling sheets, turning the city streets into quiet rivers of white. Emma tightened her scarf around her neck, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. She had always loved winter, not the bitter cold, but the way snow made the world feel still, suspended, like a secret waiting to be discovered. As she trudged through the snow toward the small cafe on the corner, her boots leaving soft impressions behind her, she noticed a figure struggling with an umbrella, tossed by the wind. The woman's hair was dark, falling in wet waves around her face, her expression one of quiet frustration mixed with stubborn determination. "Need a hand?" Emma called, hurrying over. The woman looked up, surprised. Her lips curved into a small, relieved smile. Yes, thank you," she said, her voice soft, almost melodic against the storm. They wrestled with the umbrella together, laughter breaking through the hush of the snowfall. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a spark, fragile yet undeniable, like sunlight glinting off fresh snow. "Coffee?" Emma suggested, nodding toward the warm glow of the cafe. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." Inside, the world was fragrant with roasted coffee beans and baked bread. Snowflakes clung to the windows, and outside, the city seemed to vanish under a white blanket. They sat across from each other, hands brushing over the warm cups, and conversation flowed as naturally as the snow outside, effortless, intimate, dangerous in its own way. Her name was Lila. She had moved to the city recently, chasing dreams that had felt too far away until now. And as Emma listened to Lila speak, she realized how rare it was to find someone who felt like the missing pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was completing. Hours passed unnoticed. When they finally stepped back into the storm, the snow had deepened, falling heavier, but neither of them seemed to mind. In the swirling white, Emma reached for Lila's hand. It was warm, grounding, a promise that somehow, amidst the cold and chaos, they might find something lasting. The first snow had fallen, and with it, the beginning of something neither of them expected, but both desperately needed. By the next morning, the city was almost unrecognizable. Snow draped rooftops like frosting, and streets were silent except for the occasional crunch of tires or boots. Emma had barely slept, thinking of Lila, the curve of her smile, the way her eyes seemed to catch light like snowflakes themselves. A notification pinged on her phone. A message from Lila. "The storm's worse than expected, want to come by? I have cocoa and blankets." Emma's heart skipped. Without hesitation, she bundled up and stepped back into the white world. The snow had risen past her ankles in places, but it felt almost magical, a shared adventure waiting to happen. When she arrived, Lila's apartment was warm and cozy, the kind of place that smelled like vanilla and cedar. The windows were frosted over, and through them, the snowstorm raged outside. They laughed over the absurdity of the weather, shedding layers until they were comfortably cocooned in thick sweaters and socks. Cocoa mugs in hand, they sat close on the couch, the snowstorm providing a private soundtrack. Lila's hand brushed against Emma's, first by accident, then with intention. The warmth of that touch, amidst the chill outside, sent a shiver through Emma that had nothing to do with the cold. "You know," Lila said softly, her breath fogging the air, "I didn't expect to meet anyone like this. Not here. Not now." Emma's lips curved in a shy smile. "Neither did I. But I'm glad you did." The snow continued to fall, relentless yet beautiful. Hours passed unnoticed, marked only by soft laughter, whispered confessions, and the occasional stolen kiss. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, there was a bubble of warmth, intimacy, and the quiet thrill of beginnings. Eventually, the storm would end, and the world outside would return to its normal rhythm. But for now, Emma and Lila were suspended in a perfect, snowbound moment, a fragile, fleeting forever that neither of them wanted to leave. By the third day, the snow still hadn't stopped. The city had gone quiet, blanketed under a hush so complete it felt sacred. No traffic, no footsteps, no urgency, just the slow rhythm of flakes falling and two women learning each other's presence. Lila stood by the window, watching the whiteness swirl beyond the glass. Her hair fell loose down her back, still damp from a morning shower, and the soft light turned her skin to something almost golden. Emma watched her, silently. She wanted to draw her, capture the way stillness looked on her. "You're staring," Lila said without turning around, a teasing note in her voice. Emma smiled. "Maybe. You make it difficult not to." Lila laughed, turning to face her, her cheeks flushed pink from the warmth of the heater. She crossed the small space between them and handed Emma another mug of cocoa, their fingers brushing. "I can't remember the last time I felt so still," she said. Like the world finally stopped rushing for a moment. Emma nodded. "Maybe it's meant to. So we can breathe." Outside, wind sighed against the windows. Inside, the quiet was tender, a language of looks and half-smiles and unspoken thoughts. Lila sat beside her on the floor, knees brushing. "Tell me something true," she said. Emma thought for a moment. "I used to think I liked being alone," she said quietly. "But now, I'm not so sure." Lila's gaze softened. "Something tells me you were never really alone. You were just waiting for the right person to notice." Emma met her eyes. The world outside disappeared into white. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and touched Lila's cheek, a whisper of a touch, a question. Lila leaned in, answering it. Their kiss was gentle, unhurried, the kind that feels both like a beginning and an arrival. The storm howled, but in that small apartment, the only sound that mattered was their shared breath. When they finally broke apart, both smiling through the quiet, Lila whispered, "We'll never forget this, will we?" Emma shook her head, her thumb brushing Lila's jaw. "Not even when the snow melts." By morning, the world was shining. The snow had stopped sometime before dawn, and sunlight spilled across the streets like melted gold. Trees bowed under the weight of white, and icicles hung from rooftops like crystal chandeliers. It was breathtaking, but also, somehow, bittersweet. Emma woke first. Lila was still asleep beside her on the couch, curled under a blanket, her hair tangled and soft against Emma's shoulder. The room smelled faintly of cocoa and winter air. For a moment, Emma wished she could freeze this, the quiet, the closeness, the peace before the world came rushing back. But outside, the city was already stirring again. A plow rumbled somewhere in the distance. Someone was shoveling a walkway. The spell was breaking. When Lila stirred awake, her eyes found Emma's instantly. "Morning," she murmured, smiling faintly. "The world's still here." Emma nodded. "Unfortunately." They both laughed, but the laughter was tinged with something they didn't quite name, the ache of knowing that the small, snowbound world they'd built was about to dissolve. They spent the day together anyway. Cooking breakfast with clumsy teamwork. Sharing long glances between sips of coffee. Watching the sunlight bounce off the snow until it made their eyes water. But by afternoon, the roads had cleared, and Emma had to face it, she couldn't stay forever. "I'll call you," she said at the door, her fingers brushing against Lila's. The words felt too small, too uncertain. "You'd better," Lila replied, trying to sound light. But her eyes betrayed her, they looked like the sky right before snowfall, heavy with feeling. Emma leaned forward and kissed her once more, soft, deliberate, memorizing the taste of warmth before the cold claimed her again. Then she stepped out into the glittering white streets, the crunch of snow beneath her boots somehow louder than it should have been. The city had come back to life, but she felt as though she'd left part of herself behind, wrapped in Lila's blanket, waiting for another storm. Nearly a year passed before the snow came again. Emma had moved on, or told herself she had. Work had filled her days, and city lights filled her nights, but sometimes she still caught herself glancing at the first signs of frost on windows, feeling the ghost of warmth that had once lived in a small apartment filled with cocoa and laughter. Then, one evening, as she walked home through the dim orange glow of street lamps, she felt it, a soft, solitary flake landing on her sleeve. Her heart stopped. The first snow. It came slowly, almost shyly at first, and then all at once, the kind of quiet storm that felt like a whisper from the past. She tilted her head back, let the flakes touch her skin, and before she could stop herself, her feet were already moving. Down the familiar street. Past the corner cafe. Toward that building she hadn't seen in months. Lila's building. Her hands were trembling before she even reached the door. She stood there, staring up at the window where the lights once glowed warm against the storm. She almost turned back. Almost convinced herself that some moments are meant to stay memories. And then, the door opened. Lila stood there, wrapped in a coat, a scarf loosely around her neck. Her dark hair had grown longer. Her eyes widened in disbelief, mirroring Emma's own. Emma, she breathed, the name a question, a hope, a heartbeat. Emma swallowed. I didn't plan this, she said softly. The snow just brought me back. Lila laughed, quiet, trembling. You always did have terrible timing. I know, Emma whispered. But maybe it's the only kind I get. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The snow fell between them, silent, relentless, beautiful. And then Lila stepped aside. Come in, she said. The apartment hadn't changed much. Same books stacked by the radiator. Same window frost blooming like lace. But there were new things too, a plant by the sill, a photograph half hidden in a frame. The air was still filled with that same scent of cedar and quiet. They sat down, awkward at first, both of them careful, both of them pretending the months apart hadn't hollowed them out a little. Lila poured tea instead of cocoa this time. So, Lila said softly, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. How've you been? Emma smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Busy. Cold. You? Same, Lila said, then looked up, eyes steady. Except for this moment. This one's warm. Something inside Emma cracked, gentle and aching. I missed you, she said simply. Lila exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for a year. You left when the snow melted, she said. I thought maybe it took you with it. Emma reached out, covering Lila's hand with her own. Maybe it did. But the snow came back, and so did I. For a while, they just sat there, silent except for the storm growing outside once more, history repeating itself, softly. And then, as the wind began to hum against the glass, Lila smiled. Looks like we're snowed in again. Emma laughed, and this time, it was full, unguarded. Maybe it's a sign. Lila's gaze held hers. Maybe it's fate. The storm lasted 3 days, just like the first one. But this time, it felt different. The silence wasn't awkward, and the space between them no longer carried hesitation, only the quiet comfort of recognition. They fell easily back into the rhythm of each other. Cooking together in the little kitchen, bumping elbows over scrambled eggs. Reading side by side on the couch while the world outside disappeared beneath a curtain of white. Laughing at nothing and everything, the kind of laughter that comes from remembering what it feels like to be home. Yet beneath the easy moments, there was a question hanging between them, one they both felt but hadn't dared to ask. On the second night, Lila broke the silence. Do you think, she began, tracing circles on her mug, that it was the snow that made us feel so close? Or us? Emma thought about it for a long time. The fire crackled softly. The windows glowed faintly with moonlight. I think the snow gave us quiet, Emma said. And in that quiet, we found what we'd both been too busy to hear. Lila nodded slowly. And what was that? Emma looked at her, really looked. That we don't need a storm to find each other anymore. The words lingered in the air, warm and fragile. Lila smiled, eyes glistening. Then stay. When the snow melts this time, don't disappear with it. Emma reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with deliberate certainty. I wasn't planning to. They stood by the window that night, watching the world glow silver under the streetlights. Outside, the snow still fell softly, patient, forgiving, endless. Inside, two women leaned into each other, wrapped in a kind of warmth that didn't need rescue anymore. For the first time, it wasn't about being snowed in. It was about choosing to stay, long after the thaw. Spring arrived quietly, almost unnoticed. The last patch of snow on the corner roof finally gave in to the sun, and Lila's window was open for the first time in months. The smell of rain replaced frost, and the sound of birdsong filled the air. Emma stood by the kitchen counter, barefoot, pouring coffee while sunlight spilled across the floor. Lila slipped behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "No storm this year," Lila whispered. Emma smiled. "We made our own weather." Outside, the world bloomed. Inside, love, steady, unhurried, warm, held its quiet ground. The snow had come and gone, but what it brought remained. Turn on notifications bell to never miss a story. Share your thoughts in the comments, we love hearing from our viewers. Some winters pass, but some stay inside you, warm and quiet, like the memory of the one you'll never lose.